You're listening to Based in Fact, a true crime podcast. Join host Lisa O'Brien and Kyle Evans as they examine America's most infamous true crime cases as they were established in our courts and the basis for the decisions of the appeals courts, not the court of public opinion. Here's Lisa and Kyle.
Welcome to season 3 of Based in Fact, a true crime podcast. We're your hosts, Lisa O'Brien and Kyle Evans, and this is episode 6, State of Florida versus Dalia Dippolito, part 1. On August 5th, 2009, the producers and camera crew for the Cops television show got more than they bargained for when they were invited along to film the resolution of a 5-day murder for hire investigation, which started when a convenience store owner reported that his girlfriend was trying to hire someone to kill her husband. We'll talk about the evidence against Dalia Dippolito, her first trial and successful direct appeal, and her attorney's attempt to have the charges dismissed using the presence of the Cops television show cameras to undermine the evidence against their client. And good afternoon, Kyle. How are you? Oh, it looks like he's still muted.
Sorry, my computer froze up. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Oh,
How are you?
very well, thank you.
This is one of the one of the crazier cases. They're all crazy, but I'm looking forward to this one because this one's definitely unusual.
Yes, it is a highly unusual case. But I think it's made more so by the audacity of the perpetrator
Yes,
in this
exactly. Yeah.
case. And
Yes.
we will get into that a little bit more later. Of course, in this case, the almost victim, Michael Anthony Dippolito, was born December 18, 1970 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His father was Edward Dippolito Sr., his mother, Joan DeVico, who passed away on February 19th, 2021. And Mike, if you happen to catch word of this show on Facebook, please direct message me. I would love to talk to you. And my condolences for your mom. His siblings are Edward Jr. and Christina. He graduated from Central Bucks High School East and attended Montgomery County Community College. He is a businessman and realtor. He was married first to Maria Rosario Luongo. That was from 2007 to 2008. And then he married Dalia Adel Muhammad in 2009. They were divorced in 2011 for obvious reasons. And he has one child, a daughter, who lives in South Florida. The perpetrator is Dalia Adel Muhammad Dippolito. She was born October 18th, 1982 in New York, New York. She may have been born in Queens, not sure about that. Her parents are Adele Muhammad and Rhonda Gonzalez Muhammad. Her siblings are Amir, a brother, and Samira, a sister. She is the oldest of 3 children. Her education, she graduated from Santa Lucis High School in Lantana, Florida. She was an escort and prostitute. She also was a madam very briefly in California, but obviously did not do well enough to make that her career.
She's like the Florida Heidi Fleiss.
Well, she went out to California and tried to set up an online service and failed miserably. And then she also claimed to be a real estate agent, but she was screwing the guy whose her sole sale was from the guy she was sleeping with. So you can't really put too much stock in her talent as a real estate agent. She married Michael Anthony Dippolito in 2009. They are now divorced for obvious reasons. She has one son who was born in 2016 while she was on house arrest. So they wouldn't let her go to work. She had to do something with her time. She decided to get knocked up.
Was Michael the father, or do we know who the dad was?
No, well, the dad is another convicted felon. Apparently it was all very hush hush, and her attorneys were very protective of the facts of that situation. But yeah, I mean, they won't let her go out to go to work. She only gets to go to church. So she decides while she's facing felony charges to get knocked up and have a baby. I guess because she was so convinced she was going to beat those charges. But again, we'll go into that a little later. Emotional, mental, she's manipulative, she's a liar, she's a thief, and she's vindictive person, according to several people who knew her. Her prior crimes involve prostitution, promoting prostitution, theft, forgery, false reports to law enforcement, and perjury. And her attempted victim, was Michael Dippolito, her husband. Now, I want to go into Mike is no angel. So I'm going to go into his history, which became more of a feature at the retrial than it was at her initial trial. But I want to get it out of the way because chronologically it comes first. In May of 2001, he was indicted on multiple charges for communications fraud, unlicensed telemarketing, RICO, fraudulent entry to sell stock, and grand theft. That was in Broward County, Florida. He had a warrant issued on March 4th, 2002, which was served on March 20th, 2002. So he was arrested. His bond was set at $1,000. He bonded out, and I just got the internet connection. How much did I blank out?
Yeah, you probably blanked out about 10 seconds.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't know why we have the panoramic Wi-Fi, but when I'm at this computer doing the podcast, this is the only time I get the internet has become unstable message. It annoys me as much as it annoys you folks. His bond was set at $1,000 and he bailed out. He entered a not guilty plea on April 3rd, 2002. A second warrant was issued on April 8th, 2003. The records aren't available, so I don't know what happened, but perhaps he was involved in a similar type of business as the first one. And so they rearrested him. His bond was raised to $25,000 on April 23rd. But I think it looks like he was able to bond out. And then he was rearrested and set with no bond on April 25th, 2003. Or April 28th, 2003. My mistake. On May 14th, 2003, he entered a plea deal which had him pleading nolo contendere, which is the same as an Alford plea. It's saying, I'm not going to admit that I'm guilty, but you have enough evidence to convict me, so I'm not going to contest the charges. And this is common, like with traffic tickets.
Right.
If you plead nolo, you just have to keep your nose clean for a year. But if you get another ticket, you're going to face the consequences of both tickets. So that is, he agreed on this. And I mean, he agreed to it within a year of being arrested. So this was not a long drawn out, I didn't do it. He was sentenced on May 14th on the first count that he pled nolo to. I don't know what specific count of the indictment that involved, because the Broward records don't say and the documents aren't available. He was sentenced to 2 years in DOC, 28 years probation, and restitution in the amount of about $191,000. Count 2.
Well, folks, it looks like Lisa's having a little internet trouble again. So those of you that, you're back. I was like, you cut out. I don't know if it was me, but you cut out for just a quick sec. So
okay. No, thank you for doing that. Thank you. Okay, so he had restitution of $191,000 on count 1. Count 2, he got 2 years in DOC concurrent with the 2 years he was already going to serve, and 3 years of probation, which ended in 2008. And on June 5th, 2017, his probation was terminated because he was able to pay his restitution in full. Now, had he not met Dalia Dippolito, that probably would have happened a little bit sooner. So let's get into the story. And this is a story.
Yeah, it's, I mean, not to be, it's always fascinating, I want to marry a hooker. That just seems like of all the women in the world, maybe she was the hooker with the heart of gold, but
that's what he thought.
I'm gonna marry a hooker is always just fascinating to me.
Yes. Well, she wasn't really a hooker because she wasn't out on the street. She was doing an escort service through the internet.
Got it.
I mean, you got to give it to her. She had come in, she had brought the profession, the oldest profession, into the internet age.
She was the pets.com of hookers.
You know, she wasn't like out on 1441 standing under all the street light.
Yeah, there you go.
Plying her craft. But
yeah,
the victim,
I'm sure there's an app for that now these days.
Yep, there probably is. The victim, or attempted victim, is Michael Anthony Dippolito. The crime occurred in various locations around Boynton Beach, Florida, and that is in lovely Palm Beach County, Florida. Mike Dippolito met Dalia Muhammad in October of 2008. Mike was working late and his first wife, Maria, was out of town, so he ended up on an internet escort site and found Dalia's page. He placed his order and Dalia responded. Their whirlwind courtship ended his first marriage, of course. Within a month of meeting Dalia on October 23rd, 2008, Mike had filed for divorce from his first wife, Maria. That was only the beginning of his troubles.
I mean, I'm not like, I feel bad for the guy, but I mean, if you leave you shouldn't leave your wife anyway and cheat on her, but if you do it with a prostitute, I don't think Mike is going to be president of the Florida Mensa chapter.
No, and he is probably the first to admit that he made a lot of dumb decisions. In fact, I think he has
understatement of the
media interviews admitted to that. But you know, another thing you have to see is how manipulative Dalia was and how good she was at convincing men that they were the one and only man for her.
Yeah, clearly.
And I think, in Mike's defense, I think that was what it was. That she was able to convince him she was madly in love with him. He believed he was madly in love with her. He believed she had money, so he didn't have to carry her. Of course, what she had was probably either family money or money from prostitution or money she was getting from some other man, because she apparently had a guy in New York who was paying for her car at the time, and a guy in Connecticut who was madly in love with her, and she was promising the future to, and then Mohammed Shahade, who she was promising the future to with him, or he was just a little bit of sex on the side. You know, she was just, and it was like she was collecting men as victims.
Yeah, I mean, there's something magical there. I'm not gonna say what it is, but I mean, she's not unattractive, but she's not Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman.
Yeah. So, Mike is the first to admit that he was no choir boy. He succumbed to the lure of easy money in 2001 and associated himself with some shady characters and engaged in various financial crimes. Mike has always taken responsibility for his bad decisions evidenced by the fact that once he was caught, he dropped his not guilty plea and entered a nolo contendere and served 2 years in state prison. An additional term of his plea included the restitution in the amount of $191,000 and a probation term of 28 years. After his release from prison, Mike began putting his life back together. He initially worked as a cook until a friend brought him into an internet marketing business, which enabled Mike to earn more money toward payment of restitution and to save money and live a high life. In 2007, he married his longtime girlfriend, Maria. He attended his probation meetings and he met his restitution payment obligations. Then he met Dalia. He knew she was an escort, but she also convinced him that she was a woman with her own money. Dalia wasn't earning that money in the traditional sense. It was either family money or money she was fleecing from other men. By early 2009, Mike had saved enough to buy his first home. The condo in Boynton Beach was Dalia's one and only real estate sale. By January 2009, Dalia had moved in with Mike. Though the ink was barely dry on
did she go to, sorry, not to pick, did she go to like Champions Real Estate School and get her license just for the one sale? That seems like a lot of work for one closing.
Well, that's really kind of a murky topic. It appears that she did whatever she needed to do, perhaps as a cover for the escort business to go get a real estate license. But she wasn't really employed by any real estate firm.
Got it.
And it may be in those days or when she did it, it may have been easy to get a real estate license because real estate was a booming in Florida. And so it was easy for her to do and didn't take a lot of effort. I don't know. But you know, if I can dig up any facts about that real estate license, I will supplement this part of the next week. I will supplement it.
Got it.
If I can find any, if I can dig up any details. So by January 2009, Dalia had moved in with Mike, though the ink was barely dry on the divorce decree issued by the court on January 28, 2009. On February 2nd, 2009, Mike and Dalia were married. Dalia claims she loved Mike, but events show that to be a bald-faced lie. Dalia loved Mike's money and his assets, and by March 2009, she was looking for a hitman to kill him. Her first attempt with local gang members didn't work out. According to some sources, they took her money and didn't follow through with the hit. When her first effort to hire a hitman was a bust, Dalia used Mike's probation and the restitution plan as a means of getting control of some of Mike's money. Mike hired a lawyer, and on January 29, 2009, that lawyer filed a motion to terminate his probation. Dalia had convinced Mike that she would help him meet his full restitution by offering him $91,000 of her own money. She also convinced him to give her $100,000 that she would wire to his attorney to be used for a lump sum payment. Lo and behold, the $191,000 disappeared, and Dalia had a lot of stories, none of which were true. Her bank records clearly show that she spent the $100,000 Mike gave her and that she never had the $91,000 she promised him. Her first lie was to blame Mike's attorney for the theft. When that didn't work, or perhaps in an effort to prove the lie, Dalia created a fictitious Cayman Island bank account and a fake receipt for a wire transfer of $191,000. She held Mike off for a while by telling him the wire transfer would be reversed and the money was being sent back. Finally, she claimed that in trying to save money and fees on the wire transfer, the money was stolen from her. Next, Dalia brought in Eric Tall, a friend of a friend. The scheme involved Mike giving Tall $180,000, $150,000 in cash, and a $30,000 cashier's check. Tall would loan Mike $11,000 and provided him with a cashier's check in the amount of $191,000. The day before the check could be dropped off with Mike's attorney, Tall faxed a promissory note for $41,000 and placed a lien on Mike's condo. The attorney refused to accept Tall's terms. And, you know, when you do the math, I'm not great at math, but I'm good enough to know if Mike is giving Tall $180,000, Mike is only borrowing $11,000 from him.
Right.
So, but I guess the 40,000, the 30,000 above is the interest. So, I think that's like loan sharking or usury.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
And
Gotta be one of those, yeah, those Florida loans.
The promissory note and the lien were not terms that Mike was ever told were necessary. Tall agreed to issue a new cashier's check to a new attorney, but stalled, claiming that his bank account had been frozen and he couldn't access the original $191,000 he put back in his bank. Mike never received a cashier's check from Eric Tall. The final straw for Mike's attorney came when he was given a cashier's check for $191, which Mike got from Dalia, instead of the $191,000 that it was supposed to be. The attorney promptly fired Mike as a client. In later litigation, Tall denied receiving any cash from Mike and claimed he gave the $30,000 cashier's check to Dalia. When Dalia started looking for the hitmen in March, she'd used a former lover client, Mohammed Shahade. Although he refused to help her, Dalia remained in contact with him throughout the spring and summer of 2009. Some of Mike's money was even used to purchase a Range Rover for Shahade. That was also promised to the hitmen in March. Dalia enlisted another lover client, Mike Stanley, for her plan B, which involved revocation of Mike's probation and putting him back in prison for 28 years. Dalia would then be able to steal everything he had, and he'd be powerless to stop her. The scheme involved Dalia and Stanley making repeated false reports to Mike's probation officer and law enforcement, accusing him of drug dealing and domestic violence. Dalia planted drugs in his vehicle twice, then tipped off law enforcement. The first time, the drugs weren't found, and Mike was let go. The second time, when the drugs were found, Mike's bewilderment and upset were genuine enough for the officers to believe his claims that someone was out to get him. Around July of 2009, Dalia sunk to a new low when she told Mike she was expecting their first child together. She used Stanley to pose as her doctor to confirm the news for Mike, who by this time was becoming skeptical of his wife's veracity. Of course, Dalia's goal was to get Mike to forgive her for the money she'd stolen and to cover her attempts to have him falsely arrested and imprisoned. Because Mike was now without a lawyer, Stanley posed as a criminal lawyer in Miami who could help Mike get an administrative probation. In theory, this would relieve Mike of the obligation to report to probation officer each month and relax some of the restrictions on his ability to travel within the state of Florida. To make the ruse work, a friend of Dalia's mother posed as the attorney's paralegal who was sent to pick up an application from Mike. This was yet another scheme designed to make Mike believe the terms of his probation had changed when they hadn't, and to get his probation revoked for failure to report. Stanley was also used to try and convert Mike's business account using false claims to get them frozen, seized, or transferred to Dalia. Dalia tried to poison Mike with antifreeze after researching poisons. As with her drug planning efforts, this one was equally unsuccessful. Mike tasted something off and disposed of the poison drink Dalia brought him. On July 29, 2009, Stanley, again posing as the attorney, convinced Mike to transfer the title of his home to Dalia based on the lie that Mike's ownership was causing problems with the administrative probation process. On July 31st, 2009, Mike and Dalia went to the title agency to sign the paperwork. It was at this time that Dalia found out that, under Florida law, Mike's consent would still be required to mortgage the property or sell it. This is because it's a marital residence. This was a point that Dalia decided that Mike's life had a firm expiration date, and she set that date at August 5th, 2009. Once Mike's house was in her name, she reached out to Shahade again, seeking his help to find a hitman who would get the job done. When Shahade realized that Dalia was serious, he contacted the Boynton Beach Police Department. And his story is kind of fluid. He tried to report it in either Riviera Beach or Palm Beach Gardens, but he somehow knew Dalia was in Boynton, so they said you have to go to Boynton Beach Police Department. Initially, the detectives who interviewed Shahade weren't sure what to make of his claim. He didn't know Dalia's last name and didn't know her husband's name, which was slightly amusing. Probably Shahade's mannerisms were also slightly amusing. He also didn't know where they lived. Shahade seemed credible to the detectives, but it was a bizarre situation, especially when Shahade told them about the March 2009 encounter Dalia had with the gang member and her attempt to poison her husband. A controlled call was arranged and Shahade's information was confirmed, and he was enlisted to act as a confidential informant. A meeting with Dalia was arranged to take place at a mobile gas station on August 1st, 2009. This meeting was videotaped, and in it, Dalia was filmed giving Shahade $1,200 that he told her was a down payment for the hitman and for him to purchase a gun. In addition to the payment, Dalia made multiple incriminating statements and provided a picture of Mike for the hitman. The hitman
still shocked that these people hire a hitman and like, let me just go tell like 4 different people who are gonna like, well, I'm having a senior moment. It was like the case. Oh goodness. Was it in Houston where there was like, 3 people involved, you get all these people before they finally got to the person that actually pulled the trigger, like so many people to share with police.
Was that, wait, that might have been, are you thinking of Leon Jacob?
I'm blanking. No, it's the one where it's like there was like 3 people involved. The guy that actually pulled the trigger, then the guy that arranged the hitman.
Frauda.
Yes,
Frauda.
thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Frauda. Yes.
That's right, Frauda.
And Frauda's and if it weren't for Price Stash's girlfriend,
yes,
the whole thing might have never been found.
Exactly.
But yeah. Well, as police had some evidence that led them to Price Stash and Guidry. So, but yeah, that is kind of, and well, in Dalia's defense, Shahade is kind of a shady character, and he runs with shady characters. So she figured he's a safe person to tell because he's shady and he ain't going to go to the cops.
Right.
So, anyway, the hitman contacted Dalia directly and arranged to meet with her on August 3rd, 2009. Prior to this meeting, Dalia and Shahade met in a nearby Chili's. Shahade's recording device failed during this meeting, so what was said is lost. At her meeting with Officer Witty Jean, the pretend hitman, which was also memorialized on video, Dalia was initially coy, but eventually filled the hitman in on Mike's schedule, which would include a trip to a local bank to make a large cash withdrawal. Dalia proposed that Mike be killed outside the bank, with the hitman taking the money he carried as payment for the hit. So it's like, she doesn't bring the hitman the money he wants, but she's got an alternative payment plan. And to pay him more money, because she said Mike's going to take $10,000 out of the bank. So the hitman's going to make $10,000 right there on the spot.
Yep.
And, all of her statements make her defense all the more ridiculous. But we'll get to that a little later. This is the infamous video on which Dalia is seen making the proclamation that she was 5,000% sure that she wanted Mike dead. When the hitman nixed the bank plan proposed by Dalia, she contacted Shahade, objecting to the hitman's plan to murder Mike in her home because she didn't trust the guy not to steal all her stuff. During that conversation, she proposed canceling the deal with the hitman, getting the gun from him, and killing Mike.
Don't steal my fake Louis Vuitton purse.
No, it was a real Prada purse. And it was real David Yurman jewelry.
Where do they get all this money? She's a failed hooker.
Okay.
She was a failed madam.
She was stealing it
but
from
I know
she was stealing it from Mike.
Right? Yeah, she's got 5 or 6 guys on the
Mike was involved in another internet marketing business that apparently was very, very, very lucrative, although I'm not quite sure how it was so lucrative.
Right.
And I would love to speak to Mike to find out how it was so lucrative, because he was allowed to continue while he was on probation with the business. So there was nothing, it was apparently enough above board that he was able to continue while he was on probation. But I don't know how it was so lucrative. And I wonder if it was anything like Jen Shah's marketing thing. Like I said, I would love, Mike's on Facebook. I have spent the last week debating whether to send him a friend request. But I'm hoping when I post this episode on Facebook that somehow or another he will find out, and that he can DM us. He can friend, send me a friend request. And I would love to talk to him, because he really, in everything I've seen of him, he seems like, he's just like one of those Philly, Jersey boys. He still seems a little naive, but he's just a good guy. And I think he looks for the good in other people.
Right.
And maybe that's because of his upbringing was not so great. But, I don't know. But he gave this girl every benefit of the doubt for a very, very long time. Because from the time he was released from jail until he met Dalia, he had zero contact with cops. And yet he meets Dalia, and within a few months, they're searching his vehicle multiple times. Anyway, after Dalia's outburst, the Boynton Beach police decided that it was the best to take Dalia off the streets. On August 4th, 2009, Dalia received a call from the hitman telling her to be out of the house early the following morning. On August 5th, 2009, Dalia left the house for the gym with all of her jewelry in her Prada purse to establish her alibi during her husband's murder. She expected to find Mike dead by the time she got home. During the later weeks of Dalia's efforts to engineer Mike's downfall or death, the TV show Cops had reached out to South Florida law enforcement agencies to arrange visits with several jurisdictions, including Boynton Beach PD, to film their law enforcement operations. With the exception of the final day, the Cops cameras were not involved in any stage of the investigation of Dalia Dippolito. Cops camera and personnel were present for a briefing prior to the staging of a crime scene outside Mike's condo and notification of Mike of the plot to kill him, and they rode along and filmed the sting operation that resulted in Dalia's arrest. Cops had no part in the events that led to Dalia's arrest or the criminal charges she would face in Palm Beach County, Florida. So, that was probably a bit of a long story, but it provides an important context.
Oh, I think we lost her again, Lisa. I think your internet cut out for just a minute.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay.
Guess who's back?
That was a long story, but I think it's important context for, especially when we look at what her eventual defenses were. All right, so Dalia was arrested on August 5th, 2009 by the Boynton Beach Police Department. Now, anyone who hasn't seen the sting, you can watch Cops' Smooth Criminal episode. You can watch Dateline. You can watch 2020. This story has been covered. You can find videos on YouTube. it is priceless. So when Dalia initially arrives as a witness at the Boynton Beach Police Department, she believes Mike has been killed in a shooting at her house and does not realize that the police have been in on it the whole time. So initially she follows through what she told Muhammad she would do. She starts throwing everybody's name out there, alleging that his 2001 charges and his attempts to get off probation have angered people in the mob, and that they're the ones who killed him. They have that they have motive to kill him, et cetera, et cetera. She's just, the audacity is just frightening, to say the least. A criminal probable cause affidavit was filed on August 5th, 2009. Solicitation to commit first-degree murder, homicide, willful killing, murder premeditated. From jail, within hours of her arrest, Dalia calls Mike to try to convince him that she didn't try to hire someone to kill him. She implies that the videos and audio are somehow fabricated, and she wants his help. At one point, he offers his help if she'll sign the house back to him. And again, this call is all out there, all over the internet, all over YouTube. Listen to it. When he suggests her signing the house over, her voice goes ice freaking cold. I'm not signing your house over. I'm not signing the house over. And then she calls her mother back and tells her mother, get him out of my house. So she was going to keep that fucking house if it was the last thing she did.
She is crazy.
The venue is in the criminal division of the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit of Florida, in and for Palm Beach County. The judge assigned was the Honorable Jeffrey Colbath. The docket number is 50-2009-CF-009-771-AXXX-MB, and it was in Criminal Division W. An order finding probable cause was entered on August 6, 2009, along with a no contact order. Notice of arraignment was entered on August 6, setting arraignment for September 21st, 2009. Dalia's bond was set at $25,000, and she was able to bond out of jail. Her counsel was Michael Salnick. The state was being represented by Elizabeth Parker. Mike filed multiple things over the next week or so. He filed a foreclosure lis pendens action, basically to keep Dalia from selling the house or doing anything, mortgaging the house or doing anything to encumber the house while it was still in her name. He filed a complaint against Dalia. He filed a petition for dissolution of marriage on August 7th. Dalia was served with that paperwork on August 19th, 2009. He filed a divorce action for domestic violence on August 10th, 2009. A temporary injunction was issued at that time as well, so that kept Dalia from encumbering or getting rid of any assets or marital assets. A waiver of arraignment in the criminal case was filed on August 11th, 2009, and a not guilty plea was entered. Returns of service on the divorce and the dissolution actions were filed on the 14th and 25th of August. On August 26, 2009, Dalia filed an answer and affirmative defenses in one of the matters. I think that was the divorce DV. Or no, that was the foreclosure lis pendens. Then Mike filed an amended dissolution petition on the 9th of September. The lis pendens action was dismissed on September 16, 2009. Dalia filed a counterclaim in the dissolution case on November 6, 2009, and an answer on November 13, 2009. Mike filed an amended motion to determine privilege and invalidate deed on November 25th, 2009. That was denied on January 20th, 2010. Mike sought rehearing, and that was denied on the 29th of January. Mike filed an appeal. That went to the 4th District Court of Appeal on the 17th of February. Dalia on, this was in 2010, Dalia filed a motion for contempt in the dissolution case on March 8, 2010 for Mike's failure to file a certificate of compliance and a financial affidavit. So obviously in this divorce, Dalia's going to play the victim. And she's going to pretend that she's entitled to spousal support and the house is hers and Mike gets nothing. Which is funny because one of the things she told Muhammad is she had to kill him because if she tried to divorce him, he'd come after her and take everything from her. Mike's appeal was dismissed on May 17, 2010. So again, the house remained in Dalia's name and was not
insane.
Returned to Mike.
It's crazy.
Discovery and depositions were held in the criminal case from 2009 to 2011. Florida's like Arizona, they do pre-trial discovery. So they deposed every police officer involved in the investigation. They deposed people from cops. They deposed Mohammed Shahade. I mean, they just went to town taking depositions. One of Mike's cases, I think it was the list pendants, was administratively closed on April 4th, 2011. Then Dalia's case proceeded to trial after all of the depositions and discovery were concluded. She was represented by Michael Salnick and another attorney whose name I did not see. And Elizabeth Parker represented the state with Lori sitting second chair. The trial was held from April 25th, 2011 to May 13th, 2011. Dalia's defense basically was that she was acting and everything was a scheme cooked up by Mike to get a reality show. Now, she didn't testify, but they hired an expert witness to testify about reality shows and The Boy in the Balloon. And that was their defense. And this was all cooked up by Mike, who doesn't appear in any of the recordings or any of the controlled calls or any of the videos during the investigation. And the first time anybody at Boynton Beach talked to Mike was on August 5th, 2009. And if you watch that episode of Cops, Mike's reaction shows he was not in on this bullshit. And anybody who says he was is crazy. Dalia was found guilty on May 13th, 2011, and her bond was revoked on the same date, and she was put into Gun Club, which is what they call the prison or the county jail in Palm Beach, or one of the county jails in Palm Beach. She filed a motion for a new trial on May 20th, 2011, arguing that the prosecutor highlighted and emphasized the fact that she did not testify at trial. The trial court made improper comment on the evidence when it asked a witness if she was related to Detective Hurley, who wasn't part of our story, but he's false, he's fake. He doesn't exist. The trial court erroneously denied Dippolito's request for a mistrial after that happened. The trial court erred when it failed to permit individual voir dire of jurors, resulting in the panel being exposed to the allegation that Dalia attempted to poison Mike. Improper instructions and improper verdict form were used. The trial court erroneously permitted the state to introduce evidence of Dippolito's prior bad acts. and then cumulative error, the catch-all be-all. A motion to file additional grounds in support of motion for new trial was filed by Dippolito on May 26th. On May 27th, the court ordered that filed, or granted permission for filing, and that was filed on June 2nd, 2011, and basically arguing that the state failed to exercise due diligence in determining whether Mohammed Shahade was present in the United States prior to the date his videotape perpetuated testimony was played for the jury. Basically, Mohammed told the prosecutors that he was going to be out of the country in the Mideast. He's from Jordan. During the time of the trial. So his deposition for perpetuation of testimony was taken, which is like like trial testimony. He was questioned by the state, and then he was cross-examined by Dippolito's counsel. Apparently, he made overtures that he would come back to the United States early to testify at the trial live, but somebody gonna have to pay all his expenses if he's gonna do that.
Always
and
want
that
something.
would include a hotel for him to stay in,
and not
while
the Holiday
he's testifying.
Inn. Not the Holiday
well,
Inn.
no,
I'm
he
sure.
wasn't precious about what kind of hotel it would be, but they were gonna have to play plane ticket, rental car, hotel. The state was not interested in doing that. And apparently neither was Dippolito's counsel, because they never accepted the offer or offered to do so. Because they could have said, okay, yeah, let's bring him back live. We'll pay his expenses. So again, you had the chance, you had the opportunity to have him testify live, and you elected not to do so when the state said it wasn't going to do so. Arguing that he was the state's witness is ridiculous. The state, doesn't have to have him testify live. Now, as it turns out, spoiler alert, this was all probably a lie, because Shahade, shady character that he is, he lies to people, just like Dippolito. That's why they're such good friends. He wasn't going to be still out of the country. He was going to be back in the country. He probably just didn't want to be at the trial live. And he probably wanted to make the state jump through some hoops. And, maybe it was a scam to get the state to pay his expenses to come back to the United States. But whatever the reason, apparently on May 5th, 2011, he was arrested for DUI in Florida. And before that, he rented a car, which was presumably the vehicle he was driving when he committed DUI. So the state filed a response. Dippolito filed a reply. An order was entered denying the motion for new trial on June 8, 2011 on the additional grounds. The initial motion for new trial had already been denied. A quitclaim deed was signed by Dippolito and presented to Mike when he testified at the sentencing hearing by Dippolito's attorney, Michael Solnick, arguing that she never wanted to keep the house. She never wanted to keep the house. She was always willing to sign the house over. But I think Solnick was trying to use, Solnick tried to use the house as bargaining chip. At one point, they even presented to the prosecution, she'll sign over the house if you support no jail time.
And I know you went over it, but I'm still having trouble following. How was she able to steal his house?
She had her lover, Mike Stanley, or client, Mike Stanley, posing as an attorney, say, you owning this house is causing problems with administrative probation because they want you to pay the restitution money back.
So he
and if you own this house, then you have to take out a mortgage on the house. So if you don't own the house anymore, then
I hope that guy, he was pretending to be an attorney.
He was pretending to be an attorney, and he was never actually charged with those crimes. But because it wasn't caught on any audio or video to prove it. we'll get to that in part 2, his outcome in part 2, as with Shahade. But right now, that's immaterial. But yeah, he was basically tricked to sign over the house to Dalia. And then Dalia was told, well, even though it's in your name, you're married and it's your residence, you can't do anything with it. If you do anything with it, he has to sign something that says it's okay with him. And that includes taking out a mortgage. And part of that is because, and that's the same in Louisiana. We've had cases where clients don't understand why they have to do that, but because we're a community property state and the house was bought while you were married, or the house came into your possession while you were married, we have to have your spouse saying, I have no interest, and she can do what she wants. And that's basically all you're saying is, I have no interest in this. She can do what she wants with it. So, on the 16th of June, a judgment of guilty was entered by the court. Dalia was sentenced 20 years in the Department of Corrections. Florida does not have parole, so she was going to do 20 years. On the 21st of June, a corrected judgment of guilty was entered. I'm not quite sure what the distinction was between the first one and the second one, but I will examine them more closely and try to shed some light on that next episode in part 2. An amended motion for new trial and request for evidentiary hearing was filed on June 22nd, 2011. And that basically just provided the additional evidence that Dalia's attorneys developed regarding Shahade's presence in the United States prior to and during the time frame of the trial, and arguing that he could have testified live, that she was entitled to confront him live, and that they wanted testimony from the state regarding its efforts to basically confirm or determine his whereabouts prior to the trial, and what efforts they made, if any, to determine those whereabouts prior to trial. A hearing was set on that on June 23rd for July 1st. That hearing was canceled on the 28th and reset for June 11th. Dippolito filed her notice of appeal to the 4th District Court of Appeal on June 11th. She also filed a motion for appellate bond. Her appeal was acknowledged by the 4th District on July 21st. Her motion for supersedis bond, which was filed on the 5th of August, which is part of the motion for appellate bond, that was granted on August 23rd, 2011. Her bond was set at $500,000, and she was on house arrest. The supersedis bonds were filed by the various.
And you're off.
Oh.
Hey, Lisa, I think you died for just a sec with your internet, or your internet cut out.
She was on house arrest. It's not even giving me the message.
In a couple of seconds.
It's not even giving me the message. It's like, now it's unstable. And it's back. I just heard it click. Am I back?
You are, you're good.
She was back on house arrest. The insurance companies paid their bonds or filed their paperwork for the bonds. On September 23rd, 2011, Cops aired its episode Smooth Criminal, which dealt with the Dalia Dippolito case in the United States. That was the first time it was aired. So it was not aired until after she was convicted. The final divorce decree was entered on October 6, 2011, fully dissolving the marriage between Mike Dippolito and Dalia Dippolito. But she's got to keep Dippolito because that's the name she was charged under. The 4th District Court of Appeal on July 30th, 2014 rendered its decision in her appeal. It found that a trial court erred by denying defendants' renewed request to individually question prospective jurors about their exposure to pretrial publicity regarding defendants' case because it became apparent that a multitude of prospective jurors had been exposed to pretrial publicity, and the jurors' show of hands was insufficient to protect defendants' right to a fair and impartial jury. The trial court's error of failing to strike the jury panel after all the jurors heard an allegation that defendant had attempted to poison the victim was not harmless because the allegation involved an attempt to kill the same victim, was clearly related to the pending charge of solicitation to commit first-degree murder, and could have prejudiced jurors in rendering their verdict. The judgment was reversed in part and affirmed in part, and the matter was remanded for a new trial. The state apparently filed a motion for rehearing, which was denied on August 27th. The mandate issued on September 15th, 2014, reversed in part, affirmed in part, and remanded for a new trial. A notice of appearance was filed on October 27th, 2014. The attorneys to represent Dippolito were Andrew Greenlee, who represented her in this direct appeal, and Janet Johnson. The venue was the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit of Florida in Palm Beach County. Honorable Glenn Kelly, the same docket number, and it was Division W. I think the Circuit Court changed its name, so to speak, from criminal court to just Circuit Court, and they dropped the criminal division. Waiver of speedy trial was entered on October 10th, 2014, and a not guilty plea was entered. Stipulation of substitution of counsel was entered, enrolling Janet Johnson. An order was entered granting a motion to redepose witnesses on March 1st, 2015. I think the order was granted in open court on March 13th, but it was filed or entered on May 1st. Waiver of arraignment and not guilty plea were entered on July 13th, 2015. Brian Claypool, a TV attorney, filed a motion to appear pro hoc vice on July 13th, 2015 with Mike Eiglarsh, another TV attorney. If you watched the Jodi Arias trial on HLN, you saw Mark Eiglarsh and Brian Claypool a lot. I always liked Mark Eiglarsh, but I never liked Claypool. I'm just putting that out there.
We won't tell Mr. Claypool. Maybe he wants to come on the show and do
an interview. No. I will tell Claypool to his face how much I've always despised him. Stipulated substitution of counsel was filed on July 15th, withdrawing Johnson and Greenlee and substituting Eiglarsh and Claypool. On November 17th, 2015, Eiglarsh and Claypool filed on Dippolito's behalf a motion to dismiss the charges against her, arguing she was objectively entrapped. The egregious conduct of the Boynton Beach Police Department violated her substantive rights, including, or basically because Shahade should not have been allowed to act as a confidential informant because of his criminal history and his relationship with Dippolito. Shahade didn't believe Dippolito was a threat and didn't want her arrested. Shahade should have been deactivated because he didn't want to participate. He was not monitored or supervised. There was a missing recording from the Chili's restaurant. Shahade made over 500 calls to Dippolito that weren't monitored or recorded. A video was posted by the Boynton Beach Police Department of the staged crime scene within hours of Dippolito's arrest. The Boynton Beach Police Department violated wiretap laws when it failed to get consent to recording from Shahade and Jean. Sheridan fraudulently obtained Dippolito's signature on a waiver for cops. Sheridan lied in his written report and said he had asked Dippolito if she wouldn't mind being on cops. They also argued that Boynton Beach created a solicitation offense where none existed, that they destroyed exculpatory evidence, that was the Chili's recording, that they staged a crime scene for publicity, and that she cannot receive a fair trial. Dalia Dippolito signed a declaration on November 16th, 2015, which was filed with this in support of this motion to dismiss. She said, on July 31st, 2009, I received a phone call from Mr. Shahade. He called to let me know that in order to carry out our script, he wanted to involve a real police officer to make it more believable. He let me know he would be calling the Boynton Beach Police Department to carry out the plan. On August 1st, 2009, I met Mr. Shahade at a mobile gas station to discuss the plan. From August 1st, 2009, I answered approximately 576 phone calls from Mr. Shahade. Attached is a true and correct copy of my phone records. The phone records reflect that Mr. Shahade called me a total of 681 times between August 1st and 5th, 2009. From those calls, there were 105 that had a 0 duration, which either means he texted me or there was no answer. The calls from Mr. Shahade that were answered totaled 576. Now, I believe that as it turned out, when somebody really went through the records, these numbers were greatly exaggerated. I know everyone is shocked. During these numerous calls,
no way.
Mr. Shahade was urging me to meet with him. I was reluctant at first, but he threatened me, and out of fear for my safety, I went through with it to avoid being harmed. On August 3rd, 2009, at the request of Mr. Shahade, I agreed to meet him at a Chili's restaurant. We met for about 45 minutes. Mr. Shahade kept telling me that I needed to proceed with the script to meet with the undercover officer. I told him that I did not feel comfortable proceeding further. Mr. Shahade threatened to physically harm me and my mom while showing me his gun, unless I agreed to meet with the undercover person. Out of fear for my safety and my mom's safety, I reluctantly agreed to meet with the undercover person. On August 3rd, 2009, following our meeting at Chili's, Mr. Shahade personally drove me to meet an undercover officer, Woody Jean, at a CVS parking lot. And I believe the video actually shows her driving the vehicle, not Shahade. Again, I know you're all shocked that she lied. While at Boynton Beach,
didn't tell the. I can't believe it.
While at Boynton Beach Police Department, I was not read my Miranda rights until after I had been questioned for 40 minutes. Sergeant Sheridan gave me a paper to sign and said it was my Miranda rights and that I had to sign it. I signed the document. I would later discover the document I signed was in actuality a waiver to appear on the Cops television show. So here, Dalia is going to play the victim.
Of course.
And of course, in this declaration, none of the allegations of domestic violence are made. It's just the bullshit about a script and a scheme and a presentation. The motion to dismiss was set for hearing. The first hearing occurred on the 19th of January, 2016. Shahade testified, and his testimony was very helpful for Dippolito until he was cross-examined. And then he started to back off some of his claims. But he claimed he was reporting that Dalia was being abused by her husband, that he wanted police to call Dalia, that he didn't want her arrested, that he didn't want her in trouble, that he didn't want to act as a confidential informant, that he was threatened to prosecution if he tried to back out of being a confidential informant, that he was called frequently by Detective Marino during the investigation to get him to call Dalia, that he didn't know he was being recorded or videotaped, that he was forced to wear a wire at Chili's, that detectives laughed at him during his initial interview, that there was no ongoing criminal activity at the time he signed the confidential informant agreement, that Boynton Beach Police Department didn't tell him the truth, that he didn't authorize his name to be released, and that he didn't want to be on TV. Now, that is in direct conflict with what Dippolito's saying, is that all of this was for them to get acting jobs. But okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Anyway, the state filed a response to the motion to dismiss on February 1st, 2016. And basically their response was the investigation started when Shahade reported Dippolito's efforts to hire a hitman to kill her husband, that his information was confirmed in the first controlled call and subsequent videotaped and recorded phone calls. The only filming by cops was to capture Dippolito's reaction at the staged crime scene, which was also filmed by Boynton Beach Police Department. For the first time on February 23rd, Gregory Rosenfeld appeared on behalf of Dippolito, and he became part of the defense team after that point. A second hearing was held on February 23rd, 2016, where testimony on Dippolito's behalf for the motion to dismiss continued with testimony from Chief Katz and Stephanie Slater, both of Boynton Beach Police Department. And then Dippolito took the stand, and this is where she committed perjury on multiple areas. The fact that they didn't charge her with perjury is crazy, because they could have very easily done so, because a lot of her testimony was in direct contradiction with video evidence to the contrary. So she claims she met Mike in July of 2008 at a Starbucks, not in October 2008 when they had their first sexual contact and he paid her. She said she didn't know Mike was a convicted felon or about his probation before she married him. She claimed she was surprised when she found out about it. She said Shahade was on an episode of Burn Notice, and that was an episode with Tim Matheson.
Oh, no way. I used to love that show.
Yeah. I think if you blink, you miss Shahade, because he did not have a big role on that show.
Well, now I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find it on one of the streaming services.
Where Matheson was doing a fake hit. But I think what happened was somebody was really trying to hire a hitman, and they hired Michael. Okay, so
because I do remember Tim Matheson being on that show.
Yeah, he was on it 2 or 3 times. So, and Shahade isn't even credited on any of the episodes, but I think it was the final Tim Matheson episode.
Oh, got it.
Anyway, Mike, and Shahade were simulating that episode for an actor's project to be posted on social media. Again, she testified about the allegedly 500 calls between August 1st and August 3rd this time, which is contradiction of her prior declaration. But she claimed those were all to work on the presentation, not that they were all to somehow coerce her into going through with the plan. She didn't want to go through with the plan once the police became involved. She was forced to meet Shahade at Chili's. He told her he was being pressured and she had to go through with the plan, and showed her his gun. He threatened her family. She was afraid. Shahade took her to meet with Woody Jean. Shahade was monitoring what she said to Jean to ensure she did what he told her to do. Jean told her to bring a picture of Mike, her keys, and alarm code, but she didn't do any of those things. But she did give money and a picture of Mike to Shahade for Jean. But, you know, that distinction. She didn't bring her keys. She didn't give him any money. Sheridan didn't advise her of her rights under Miranda until the end of questioning, and tricked her into signing the cops' waiver, which was then torn up. During her cross-examination, she claimed to have done some acting after high school. She said all the evidence was on Mike's computer and the police didn't seize that. Mike was involved in everything. His computer tech, Dave Husk, was involved. She claimed Husk was going to come forward prior to her first trial, and he was then found hanging from a tree with a suicide note. And I vaguely remember a Cops episode where they found someone in a Florida jurisdiction, but I'm not sure if it was Boynton Beach, hanging from a tree. But I've never been able to find that episode. So, and that's another thing I'd love to talk to Mike about, to find out if Dave Husk really killed himself or whether that was yet another of Dalia's lies. She said that they didn't text message about this presentation, that all of their communication was either in person or by phone. She said she didn't know police were taping anything. She claimed playing the victim to be being accused of something she didn't do. She claimed the $1,200 was for Shahade, who was collaborating on the project, to reimburse him for his time. She claimed that the things she said on the tapes were things she had to say, but they weren't real. She said it's easier to remember when you put some truth into it. There was a script, but she couldn't get a copy of it after her arrest. She said Mike was in agreement with what Shahade was saying. Both of them were threatening her and forcing her to continue with the plan. That she made up stuff about Mike going to the bank. Everything she said to Woody Jean was what Shahade told her to say. She said sometimes she lies and sometimes she's truthful. She says she was 5,000% sure to project confidence. Police took their presentation and used it to wrongfully prosecute her. She called Mike from jail to ask him to tell people what really happened. She said, I was accused of something that I didn't do. The police went ahead and misused everything. There were so many calls where Muhammad was threatening me. There were so many calls that I didn't want to do this. And where are those calls? Everything that is in my defense isn't here. You are playing things, but about all the 500 calls, 600 phone calls? That was when she started playing the victim, and she cried.
Of course.
And Craig Williams was not fucking impressed at all, because he just kept hammering away at her. And so crying, I think, was her final resort. On her reject, she said that Mike said if she transferred the property to his name that he would help her. Mike told her to keep her mouth shut and it would be over in a couple of days. She thought that meant he was coming forward to say that it was all part of a presentation. All of her actions were motivated by fear. And then Sergeant Frank Ramsey was the final witness for the defense in support of this stupid motion, which is melodramatic and overblown and all speculation and allegations that aren't even close to the actual facts, and ignore plenty of facts that are so inconvenient for them, it's not even funny. And then the state's sole rebuttal witness was Alex Moreno, who was more or less the lead investigator. Then there was a closing argument and colloquy with the court by both Claypool and Craig Williams on behalf of the state. And then there was an agreed deadline for submission of summation briefs, which was agreed by the parties. On February 26, 2016, Dippolito files a motion to reopen. Claypool claims that when he talked to Dippolito, she was like, well, what about these other witnesses? Why aren't we having them testify? And so they wanted to offer testimony of expert witness Timothy Williams and additional Boynton Beach police witnesses to testify regarding the Chili's tape and the recorder, and whether or not Boynton Beach replaced any recorders or repaired any recorders during that time frame, and also to talk to Sergeant Sheridan and grill him about his lapses in judgment when he questioned Dalia Dippolito, which also is available on YouTube and is highly amusing. And I think one of the reasons they didn't initially read her Miranda rights, or actually, from what I recall, they actually did read her Miranda rights immediately. It wasn't Sergeant Sheridan. It was one of the other detectives that was in the room. So that's one of the things that Dalia does, is that she's not lying if she said he didn't read her Miranda rights, because he didn't. That's her little distinction. And that's probably one of the things that she used on Mike was, well, I didn't lie to you. That was true. The state filed a supplemental response to the motion to dismiss on February 29th, 2016. They basically said that the defendant claims the informant refused to cooperate any longer and was threatened with prosecution, but the credible testimony of the officer and the cross-examination of the informant presented at the hearing established that no one threatened the informant with prosecution, and if the informant ever refused to cooperate in the investigation, he never relayed that information to the officers. The informant even had counsel during the entire 5-day episode who easily would have contacted the officers to say that his client would no longer be cooperating. The informant was not under investigation, working off charges, or receiving any benefit for his cooperation. The defendant also claims that the informant threatened her and her family with death, showing her a firearm at a restaurant 30 minutes prior to the defendant meeting with the hired killer, if she did not move forward with the written script. The informant denies this ever occurred. The defendant never mentioned this incredible fact until many months or years later. The evidence shows that defendant on video 30 minutes later, calm, laughing, and assuring the hired killer that she can handle herself and there is no changing her mind about murdering her spouse. The defendant claims everything was a written script and rehearsed prior, but the recorded evidence shows no such written script existed or rehearsal ever occurred. The defendant also claims that the police destroyed recordings in this case. Other than allegations, there is no evidence. The defendant also claims that police were only interested in being famous on a television show and manufactured a crime where none existed to frame the defendant. The evidence shows the television show was in the works many months before the defendant hatched her plan to murder her spouse. The only filming for the television show was to capture the defendant's fake reaction to being told her spouse was shot to death, which was also recorded by the police department. The evidence shows the defendant attempted to hire a killer to murder her spouse, and to prevent the defendant from actually carrying out the murder, the police provided nothing more than an officer to play the part of a hired killer. Creating an opportunity for a defendant to commit a crime is not a due process violation. Dippolito's attorneys filed a summation brief on the 29th of February and reiterated that they needed to call 4 additional witnesses to establish certain elements of their claims. And the grounds that they allege support this are that Shahade was lied to, left unmonitored and unsupervised, threatened, and coerced, that a solicitation offense was created where none existed through Witty Jean, that they pursued, that the Boynton Beach police pursued the cops' television show for publicity and posted footage on YouTube in violation of Dippolito's rights, that Sheridan fraudulently obtained Dippolito's signature on a waiver for cops and subsequently committed perjury. The court considered the motion to reopen and found as follows. The defendant alleges that additional time is required to present testimony from 4 additional witnesses: Timothy Williams, an expert, Sergeant Paul Sheridan, Officer John Bonifair, and a city manager. To begin, the defendant has failed to establish why, through the exercise of due diligence, these witnesses were not called before, or why at the close of the evidence, the defendant did not announce a need for any future witnesses. The court has already...
They were all known at the time, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, Williams wasn't available because of the Grim Sleeper trial in Los Angeles. But all these other witnesses were available and could have been called.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like they're new. They just found them.
Yeah. The court has already considered a 55-page motion to dismiss filed in this matter and has conducted 2 evidentiary hearings. The first hearing was scheduled on January 19, 2016 to preserve the testimony of Mohammed Shahade. The defense represented to the court that Mr. Shahade was about to leave the country and that it was necessary to preserve his testimony. The court does not know if Mr. Shahade was actually leaving the country or whether, to this date, Mr. Shahade has left the country. At the January 19th hearing, defense counsel was asked how much additional time was required. The court was told that 2 additional hours would be needed. The court then scheduled an evidentiary hearing on February 23, 2016 at 1:30 p.m., giving the parties 3.5 hours to complete the presentation of the evidence. At the close of the February 23rd hearing, the court asked both sides if they had any additional witnesses. The defendant announced that she had no further witnesses. The only matter discussed at the conclusion of the February 23rd hearing was closing arguments. the court offered the parties additional time for oral summations or the option of submitting written summations. Mr. Claypool, representing the defendant, indicated that he needed to return to California. The parties were therefore given the option to submit written summations by Monday, February 29th, 2016. At no time was it ever suggested that additional witnesses were required. The defendant's motion to dismiss was filed in November of 2015. The defendant has had ample time to determine the necessary witnesses for the relief sought and to advise the court of those witnesses, and has also had ample time to present evidence to the court. The defendant has failed to show good cause why, after announcing the close of the evidence at the hearing on February 23rd, the court should reopen the evidence. More significantly, the court has considered the defendant's proffer with respect to the witnesses listed in the motion to reopen, and the testimony offered by the witnesses does not and will not impact resolution of the defendant's motion dismissed by the court. On March 2nd, the motion to dismiss was denied. Surprise, surprise. And basically, I have to read this because this is what made me fall in love with Judge Kelly. Because he really put Claypool and Eiglarsh and Rosenfeld in their place, and they were just really I think Eiglarsh got it because he withdrew shortly after this, but I don't think Claypool and Rosenfeld were smart enough to get this. And we'll see why next week, or in 2 weeks. There are several general themes raised by the defendant which, while sensational, lack any probative value when assessing whether specific action by the police violated concepts of due process. The defendant's motion is replete with accusations that the Boynton Beach Police Department is incompetent and lacks training. The defendant even describes the department as a cesspool of incompetency and lawless behavior. Certainly, there are specific actions by the Boynton Beach Police Department which must be evaluated and questioned to determine if traditional concepts of due process have been violated. However, the generalized theme repeated by the defendant that the Boynton Beach Police Department essentially acts in bad faith is candidly overblown. Another general theme advanced by the defendant is that the police manufactured her alleged crime so that they could appear on the television show Cops. There is no credible evidence to support this accusation. The police did not seek out Mr. Shahade to create a story or television script. Mr. Shahade contacted the police to report that the defendant wanted to kill her husband. It is Mr. Shahade's report to the police that initiated the investigation, not the presence of a television crew. Moreover, the Cops production crew was not directly involved in the case until after the alleged solicitation to commit murder had occurred. The only portion of the investigation actually filmed by Cops was the fake crime scene and Mr. Dippolito's reaction to the news that his wife allegedly hired someone to kill him. The court does acknowledge that while the alleged crime was not manufactured for Cops, the presence of a television crew no doubt caused the Boynton Beach Police Department to act in certain respects in a manner which is not consistent with good police practices. Now, I didn't put this in there, but basically, after the February 23rd hearing, Brian Claypool walked outside of the courthouse, and in a media interview, he said, if the judge follows the law, he'll grant this motion. If he follows the sensationalism, he's going to deny it. Mm. And so in order to show cause, ended up being issued on March 2nd, 2016, for Claypool to explain himself and potentially to remove him from the case.
Wow.
On the 7th of March, the state filed a motion to revoke Dippolito's bond because at some point she traveled to Miami without permission to Mark Eiglarsh's offices. And at that time, she was filmed for an episode of 2020, which I believe aired in late 2015, but I didn't include that on my summary. It's just one of those things that slipped through the cracks for me. On March 18th, 2016, Dalia Dippolito gave birth to her son in Palm Beach County, Florida. On the 20th of March, Claypool filed a response to the show cause order, basically saying he didn't say anything bad on purpose, and he wasn't trying to undermine the court, and he wasn't trying to impugn the integrity of the court, and he's sorry he won't do it again. On the 22nd of March, 2016, the court filed an order granting the motion to revoke bond in part and denying the motion to revoke bond in part. Basically, Eiglarsh and Claypool fell on their swords and said, we told her she could come to Miami. It's not her fault. Even though basically it doesn't matter. If you violate the terms of probation or bond, it's on you. But the motion to revoke was denied. The Dippolito was allowed to remain on house arrest, but she was, it was ordered that specifically she could not travel to Miami-Dade to meet with her attorneys, but she could travel to Rosenfeld's office. He's in Palm Beach County to meet with her attorneys. On April 4th, 2016, Dippolito filed a petition for writ of prohibition to the Court of Appeal of Florida, 4th District, and under docket number 4, DCA 16-113, seeking an order of the Court of Appeals to prohibit the prosecution from going forward with the trial, based on all of the reasons cited in the motion to dismiss. A scheduling order was issued on April 8th, 2016, setting jury selection to begin on May 20th, 2016, setting a deadline of May 16th, 2016 for motions in limine and statements of fact to be read to the jury veneer, and a jury trial to begin on May 23rd, 2016. An order was entered on May 5th, 2016, canceling those future dates pending appeal because it was before the Fourth District Court of Appeal. On August 17th, 2016, an order dismissing the petition for writ of prohibition was entered by the 4th District Court of Appeal. A petition for writ of prohibition was then filed on August 29th, 2016 with the Supreme Court of Florida, again seeking an order prohibiting prosecution of Dippolito from going forward. The court entered an amended scheduling order on September 13th, 2016, setting a date of December 1st, 2016 for a jury trial and motion hearings on November 30th, 2016. And on October 18th, 2016, Dalia's birthday, the writ of prohibition was dismissed as successive by the Florida Supreme Court, meaning you can't file something at the Court of Appeal, and then when they don't do what you want them to do, come to the Florida Supreme Court.
Go file it up.
At least not in a writ of prohibition situation. You either ask for it from the Court of Appeal or you ask for it from the Supreme Court. You can't ask for both. So that is where I ended because my notes had gotten, I was going to go through the second trial in December of 2016, but I decided not to because of the fact that my notes had gotten to 26 pages.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to be able to have a lot of time to, you want to have time to be able to go through it in depth.
Yeah, and I
26 pages is a lot.
I figured by that time we would both be getting a little tired. So, yeah, Dippolito is a piece of work. I mean, she just lies. She lies like a rug. I just found my post-colon statement for this episode. I was going to do 5,000% lies, but now she lies like a rug.
That's awesome.
So any comments, any questions, any thoughts?
No, I mean, this is just like one of, like I said earlier, this is just one of those crazy cases. It has everything. I mean, just I mean, the hooker, the crazy story, and then we're trying out to be an actor. I mean, it's funny how, and then the stolen house. I mean,
yeah,
it's just insane. And I mean, I'm just fascinated by people that just they get so addicted to their lie that they just actually, I think they start to believe it. Like she might have been better off just like saying, look, yes, I had some bad thoughts. I made a mistake. She might have pleaded down to like,
well,
relatively low. It's just like she just dug into the insanity.
Yeah. And the thing is too, if this was all a scheme to get Mike Dippolito a reality show, why did she not when when Sheridan said, we've got you on video, we've recorded everything, we know everything you said and done, why didn't she say, okay, look, my husband Mike wanted a reality show and this was his plan? She didn't say that. What she said was, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Between now and our next recording, listen to her calls and listen to her, watch the interrogation videos. Watch her. I mean, she literally doubles down on, she's one of those liars. And I think we've seen, I can't think of one right now, but she's one of those liars. When she gets caught in a lie, she just doubles down on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can't think of, I know I've seen people like that, but I just can't. She just adds more detail and tries to make it more convincing. Like creating the fake Cayman Island account and the fake receipt for $191,000 wire transfer. I mean, and if you want a book about the case, Poison Candy by Elizabeth Parker, the initial prosecutor, excellent book. And it goes into a lot of the pieces and parts. Like, you think my summary was long, but there's more stuff that was going on and happening that I just kind of didn't know how to put it into words. And that's one of the reasons I'd love to talk to Mike. Because I'd love to talk to him and say, sweetie, honey, how?
Yeah, that's what I kind of want to know too. Like, I just
wants $180,000 in cash from you. Yeah, and you just give it to him, baby.
Yeah, sure, it'd be totally great.
I mean, honey.
Batted her eyes at him.
Do you it's just, honey, you really need adult supervision, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's, I think it shows he's not quite as worldly as he likes to believe.
Yeah.
Or that he likes to project.
Yeah,
so,
that's always the
or
case,
that he
right?
was just so, he was just so madly in love with her that he didn't want to see the warts and the flaws. He wanted to believe that she loved him as much as he loved her.
Yeah, do you know, I was looking at his thing. Has he gotten remarried or anything, or is he like, I'm staying away?
Well, I thought he was supposed to, because he and another woman appeared on Inside Edition a while back. And but she was the same kind of fake booby,
hooker,
hair implant, and hair extensions.
Well, that was one of the thing. I meant to say it earlier. I mean,
and it's like, oh, I don't think and there were a couple videos that they were allegedly very, very happy, but apparently they're not, because she's not on his Facebook page. And
I know you look different in prison, obviously changes people, but like uh she looks completely different. Like you could tell she had the hair extensions. I mean, she looks like a different person and it's not just like the prison aging, but it's that Dalia just looks totally different, like a totally fake person. Like or she was a fake person when she was out, and she looks a lot different now.
Yeah, well, she doesn't have all the hair product and the straighteners, and her descent is Egyptian and Peruvian.
Right.
And those genes, I don't think they get along really well, because she's got, when you look at her hair looks like it's got a somewhat coarse texture.
Yeah, she's kind of got curly, coarse, like wavy kind of hair.
And, she's got the dark skin, but she's, I don't know that the Egyptian and Peruvian genes are playing very well together. So, the things that would make her very attractive in, in either or culture is basically they're clashing and kind of dimming her attractiveness. Because she's not really drop dead gorgeous as you would think.
Yeah, she doesn't look like, again, I mean, she's not Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. She doesn't seem like the type that you would give away everything you have for her.
Yeah. So I don't know. And I was trying to look for her, but oh, there she is. Oh yeah. And when you look at her, I'll post a picture of her when I post this episode. She's not happy to be in prison because she expected this to work, and she expected to be able to talk her way out of this little pickle she got herself into.
Right.
Or that everybody else got her into. And I think this crazy bitch literally believes that the Boynton Beach Police Department framed her.
Well, and I think she probably thought, just like her history had been, she just, shakes the fake knockers and bats the eyebrows and then just collapse and, eat out of her hand, which, I can't say that I blame her because she obviously was pretty good at that.
Yeah. So, I'll post a picture of her on, when I post the episode on Facebook. I'll post it before when she was in the free world, and then I'll post it after, now that she's in prison. And I know I'm mean and cruel and horrible, but it gives me some joy.
I mean, she did try to kill her husband. She's not, a nice person.
And she's lied. She's lied through her teeth. She stole money from him. I mean, and spent it. Spent it on other men. That's what's really offends me. She didn't sock it away or put it in a retirement plan, or when she got caught, she could have said, okay, Mike, here's your money back. But yeah, she kept him on probation 6 extra years, because in 2009 he had to start from square one. And that was a bad time to have to start from square one, because business wasn't as lucrative by then as it had been. So I'd really love to know. I would really love to know how that business worked.
Yeah, I would too. That was very interesting. I too was a little bit curious about what he did.
Yeah.
So. It'll be good to get into next week.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I didn't include was that at her first trial, one of the arguments was the house actually belonged to her, because Mike gave her money to buy a cashier's check to pay for the house. And so the cashier's check was in her name. So that meant the house was hers. Even though the money, the actual money that bought the house, that bought the cashier's check that bought the house, was Mike's, not hers. I mean, she's kind of like, I bet you she's an entitled bitch. I bet you when Dalia comes back into the free world, we will be calling her Karen.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Because she will become one of those entitled people that is going to make everyone's life, everyone around her, make their life miserable by being a Karen.
Yeah, no question.
So, all right. Well, I guess that's going to be it for today.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for your work as always. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
We'll give it 2 weeks because I got to prepare for part 2. Because I stopped when I got to her second trial, and then I stopped my notes when I got to the end of her motion to dismiss effort. Thank you for listening to Based in Fact, a true crime podcast with Lisa O'Brien and Kyle Evans. If you like the show and want to know more, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Facebook, or follow me on Twitter at O'BrienLN. Kyle and I will return in 2 weeks for episode 6, State of Florida versus Dalia Dippolito, episode 7, State of Florida versus Dalia Dippolito, part 2. We'll conclude our look at this long-running case and talk about Dippolito's second trial, which ended in a mistrial, and her third trial, which concluded in June of 2017. Then we'll look at her direct appeal and state post-conviction claims, along with the claims being considered by the federal courts. Until then, have a safe 2 weeks and stay safe.